Right now, this is Our Time in the Studio with Carolina Carroll. I welcome Freedom viewers, and let's get straight to the important news. 5 people, including a child, were injured as a result of Russian strikes on the Kharkiv region. The Russian army used attack drones. This was reported by the regional police. Residential houses, outbuildings, cars, and power lines were damaged. Railway infrastructure was also damaged in Lazova. Overnight, Russian forces launched the latest Zircon anti-ship missiles, an Iskander-M ballistic missile, a Kh-31 guided air missile, and dozens of attack drones at Ukrainian territory. This was reported by the command of the Ukrainian Air Force. Ukrainian air defense neutralized 2 Zircon missiles and more than 50 drones. The air attack was repelled by aviation, anti-aircraft missile units, mobile fire groups, electronic warfare forces, and unmanned systems units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. As a result of Russian strikes on the energy sector, consumers in 4 regions of Ukraine have been left without power. As President Volodymyr Zelensky noted, the enemy army struck critical infrastructure even on the eve of negotiations in Geneva. The Ukrainian leader also instructed the leadership of the Air Force and the Ministry of Defense to prepare the necessary additional measures to protect energy facilities, taking into account intelligence information and Russia's preparations for another massive strike. Kupyansk is under the control of Ukrainian forces. Russian units remain only in a few buildings and are unable to conduct active operations. This was reported by Viktor Trehubov, spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group. According to him, the remaining Russian occupiers in the city, armed with light weapons and drones, are holding a circular defense inside the buildings.
22 enemy call signs were recorded. That's 22 radios. All are concentrated in one specific location. The individual we are referring to here is none other than Viktor himself, who plays a crucial role in this situation. Serhiy Trehubov, who serves as the official spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, is currently providing a live update and detailed report during the nationally broadcast United News 24-hour television marathon.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine recorded 235 combat engagements on the front line over the past day. The most intense situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction. There, Ukrainian defenders repelled 63 assaults by Russian occupiers. Another 36 attacks were repelled on the Hulyapol bridge. There were 28 battles near Kostiantinovka. And in the Oleksandrovka sector, the invaders tried to break through the Ukrainian defenders' lines 21 times. Russia's total combat losses since the start of the full-scale invasion have already exceeded 1,254,000 military personnel. Of these, 1,180 occupiers were eliminated in the past day. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In addition, the day before, the Defense Forces destroyed 4 Russian tanks, 5 armored combat vehicles, and 26 artillery systems, an air defense system, and 169 units of enemy motor vehicles. Several hundred pieces of Russian military equipment were spotted by partisans at a repair site near Jankoy in temporarily occupied Crimea. This was reported by the Atesh movement. According to agents, the Russians are actively using the camp as a logistical repair hub. The number of vehicles fluctuates, but remains consistently high. To protect against airstrikes, the Russian occupiers have brought in additional air defense forces and electronic warfare equipment. All information about the deployment of defensive systems and concentrations of Russian equipment was passed on by the partisans to Ukraine's defense forces. Japan must prepare for the possibility that North Korean troops will return from Russia's war against Ukraine with valuable experience in conducting modern warfare. This was stated by Japan's Ministry of Defense. The agency noted that North Korean troops sent to Russia are studying, among other things, new methods of warfare, the use of drones, and artificial intelligence. Tokyo is concerned about the purpose and against whom the acquired skills will be used when North Korean soldiers return home. Since the spring of 2014, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, dozens of Ukrainian media workers have risked their lives to report from the front lines, bringing the truth about Russian aggression to the world. The first military journalist to die during the war? While performing his duties, was the press officer and editor of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine's TV and radio company, Captain Third Rank Dmytro Brys. He was killed on February 16, 2015, near Debaltseve. 2 years later, this very date was officially recognized in Ukraine as Military Journalist Day. Employees of the Freedom TV channel were also military journalists. Alina Gramova and Yevhen Karmazin, they were killed on October 23, 2025, in Kramatorsk as a result of a strike by a Russian Lancet drone. We dedicate our material to their memory.
This is one of the last reports by Freedom TV correspondent Elena Gramova and cameraman Yevhen Karmazin. They documented yet another Russian shellings. On October 5, 2025, Russian forces attacked Sloviansk in the Donetsk region with 3 aerial bombs. 2 of the strikes hit a residential apartment building in the city center. A bomb pierced the end of the building and the roof was damaged. The City School of Arts was also affected. 8 people were taken to the hospital, including a child. On October 23rd, the film crew was working in Kramatorsk from early morning. They were filming the aftermath of the shelling of a gas station that had happened the day before. A Russian Lancet drone deliberately struck the journalist's car. Alina Gramova and cameraman Yevhen Karmazin died at the scene.
It was a matter of seconds, even less than a second. 2 killed instantly.
Tujia. We helped the 3rd wounded person, carried him away. He had a leg wound with an open fracture. Naturally, his face was cut up, but he was breathing. We called for medics.
A special correspondent for Freedom TV channel was seriously wounded and is still undergoing treatment. Everyone.
It all transpired incredibly fast, nearly without making a single sound. It was very fast, practically silent. In the last split second, I still heard something, some kind of sound. Well, I caught myself feeling like I was flying somewhere. The sound disappeared, and I couldn't feel the left side of my body. My face, ear, arm. When I finally fell, my breathing was labored.
On March 7th alone, 20 civilians were killed in the Donetsk region. 43 people were injured, including 5 children.
Elena Gramova and her team were always among the first to go to hotspots to show the world the war crimes of the Russian aggressors. To stay until the very end, in Kramatorsk to cover the aftermath of Russian shelling and the lives of the people. Being close to the front line was her conscious choice. They showed viewers both the everyday life in the Ukrainian armed forces and how the brigades defend Ukraine, risking their own lives in the process. These were the conditions under which Alina Gramova and Evgeny Karmazin had to work, but they couldn't not do it. They believed that documenting the war and being war correspondents was their duty. On October 23, 2025, the names of the Freedom War correspondents were added to the long list of journalists who died in the line of duty. A photo of Alina and Evgeny. Now they are part of the memorial to those killed as a result of Russian aggression, which was installed in the center of Kyiv.
Every day, every night, I think about them. They were so kind.
With volunteers from the Netherlands, Frankie and Koen, the Freedom film crew met them in Donbass. They often cooked and distributed food to civilians affected by the war. The journalists and volunteers soon became friends. Now, every time Frankie and Cohen come to Kyiv, they go to Maidan to light candles by the portraits of their friends. Alina and Zhenya.
Zhenya and Alina were killed in a drone attack. It's becoming more and more unsafe there. And now we've experienced it ourselves, with the loss of 2 friends we worked closely with as well.
Freedom TV correspondents Alyona Gramova and cameraman Yevhen Karmazin become laureates of the 2025 National Award for the Defense of Freedom of Speech. Also in November of 2025, both Alyona Gramova and Yevhen Karmazin were posthumously awarded the prestigious Order of Merit, 3rd class.
The importance of Ukraine's accession to the EU was discussed by the Secretary-General of the Council of Europe, Alain Berset, who arrived in Kyiv for a visit, and Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha. Berset stated that Brussels is working on a concrete action plan that will enable Ukraine to become a member of the EU. He called this plan the most ambitious one. The diplomats also discussed key areas of cooperation, in particular holding Russia accountable, the Council of Europe's project activities, and strengthening Ukraine's institutional resilience.
But most importantly, Europe also realizes that Ukraine is needed by the European Union, that Ukraine will bring many advantages to the European Union, from security to strengthening the political, diplomatic, and economic positions of Europe, for Europe's self-sufficiency, for Europe's strategic autonomy, for the defense industry. That's why I think this process is taking on a practical dimension. The discussions are ongoing. We have had some specific conversations with different perspectives and different approaches. But, of course, there is still a lot of work ahead.
We're not just talking. We have 90 people working on Ukraine-related matters. And this office, which deals with Ukraine issues, is one of the strongest, and everyone knows about their conditions. They're dedicated to their work, to your concerns, and they are working on implementing the action plan for Ukraine. This plan is the most ambitious in recent years. It is a decisive plan for Ukraine to finally become a member of the EU. Without the Council of Europe, without its support, and without this plan, Ukraine will not become a member of the EU. That's why we are working to help you with this. We are negotiating the next plan. And for us, it will be important to continue long-term support for Ukraine, and you can count on us.
Let's take a closer look at the next topic. So the Ukrainian delegation has gone to a new round of negotiations with Russia and the United States. Another trilateral meeting will take place in Geneva, February 17th to 18th, and as reported by the head of the president's office and head of the Ukrainian delegation, Kirill Budanov, on the way he'll be discussing lessons from Ukrainian history with his colleagues and looking for the right conclusions. The main goal of the negotiations is to discuss ways to end the war and measures to ensure a sustainable ceasefire. Special attention will also be given to the issue of prisoner exchanges. The Ukrainian delegation emphasizes that its interests in security must be maximally protected during the negotiation process. The results of this round may determine the further format of diplomatic settlement and the steps for implementing the agreements. Frameworks are needed for...
The Ukrainian delegation has the necessary frameworks for the conversation. We have coordinated with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Ukraine will always be constructive. The American side is aware of this. But Ukrainians need to see real progress on security in order to have sufficient trust. Trust both in the diplomatic process and in the possible outcomes. Overall, the key to ending the war lies precisely in the issue of security. Security guarantees for Ukraine are needed. This is a key priority.
At the same time, in Russia, officials continue to publicly state that they will not be satisfied with just controlling parts of the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War have drawn attention to the words of the deputy chairman of the Defense Committee of the Russian State Duma. Alexei Zhuravlyov, for example, says that Moscow will not be limited to just gaining control over certain regions. It wants to see a so-called pro-Russian Kiev with a pro-Russian government. Experts believe that such demands reflect the Kremlin's desire to expand its conditions and complicate the achievement of a peace agreement, which could slow down the negotiation process. The Russian delegation at the negotiations in Geneva will be headed by Vladimir Medinsky, an aide to the Kremlin dictator. This was announced by Putin spokesperson Peskov. Let me remind you, Medinsky already led the Russian delegation at the bilateral talks in Istanbul last spring. According to analysts, the return of the political advisor may indicate a shift in Moscow's position. Let me remind you that in January and early February 2026, in Abu Dhabi, the Russian Federation was represented mainly by career military officers and intelligence service personnel. And according to Peskov himself, the negotiations in Geneva will cover a broader range of issues compared to Abu Dhabi. In particular, the discussion will focus on territories. The return of Medinsky to the Russian negotiation team was previously addressed by Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha. He emphasized that Ukraine is focused on achieving concrete results from the negotiations. As for Medinsky, according to Sybiha, he is known for his history lectures, but no one takes him seriously.
I'll be able to comment after the meeting regarding what the arrival of this gentleman you mentioned actually means. But we remember very well. Previous experience shows that, as always, there will be some kind of historical pseudo-lectures recited. Ukraine doesn't need that. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Washington's role is to help end Russia's bloody and deadly war against Ukraine. This statement was made by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He added that what is happening in Kyiv is horrifying, specifically the lack of electricity and heat during the coldest time of the year. The U.S. Secretary of State also said that President Donald Trump spent a year trying to find out whether Washington could act as a mediator and achieve peace through negotiations.
The United States is interested in seeing the war come to an end, and we want to do everything possible to make that happen. We managed to get both sides to the negotiating table. I mean, for the first time in several years, even if only at a technical level, military representatives from both sides sat down at the negotiating table last week in Abu Dhabi, and we will resume these talks in Geneva this week. I think this is a very positive development.
Ukraine has received a proposal from the U.S. for 15-year security guarantees. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced this while speaking with journalists at the Munich Security Conference. According to him, Ukraine is interested in longer-term commitments, and he has already discussed this with American congressmen.
We want to extend the duration of the security guarantees. It's specifically about the number of years so that it would be more effective for investors, because there will be meetings with investors and businesses soon. They need guarantees that will last longer than 5 or 10 years. Today, there is a proposal from the American side for 15 years. We want to have 20 years or even 30 years or 30 to 50 years. What will the administration agree to? We'll see.